The town of Bitter Creek had weathered dust storms fierce enough to strip paint off a church door and had tolerated sinners twice as mean as the sun-scorched land around it. But that afternoon, the wind carried something far more unsettling than grit. It carried silence, a heavy, waiting kind of silence that told every man on the street that trouble was brewing. Outside the sheriff's post, the whole town had gathered. Boots scuffed the ground. Spurs clinked nervously. A crooked wooden platform had been dragged out into the dirt, the kind used for auctions, hangings, and any justice too cheap to require paperwork. A woman stood there with her wrists bound in front of her. She was thin, pale, wrapped in a tattered black shawl that fluttered like a dying crow's wing. Her dark hair fell in tangled strands across her face, hiding everything except the flicker of defiance burning in her eyes. Elias Garrison, rancher and reluctant visitor to town, reined in his horse the moment he saw her. He had ridden in only to buy a new saddle latch, but the sight of that platform stopped him cold. Sheriff Dunn cleared his throat and stepped forward, his voice cracking like a whip across the courtyard. "This here woman owes $5 in taxes she ain't able to pay. Law says we auction her labor till the debt's cleared." A few men chuckled. One spit into the dirt. "Black widow," someone muttered. "Every husband she's had winds up dead. Her luck rubs off." Elias frowned. She didn't look cursed. She looked broken, worn thin by grief and harsh miles, but not dangerous. Not wicked. The sheriff slapped the post with his palm. "Startin' bid, $1. No one spoke. Even the drunk sleeping by the well didn't stir. The silence thickened, pressing down on her. The woman lowered her gaze, humiliation tightening her shoulders. Elias felt something twist deep in his chest, an ache he hadn't felt in years. He didn't plan to step forward. He didn't plan to interfere with the sheriff or the crowd or the law. But some things weren't planned. Some things were simply right. He reached into his coat and pulled out a silver coin. $5, he called. "Her debt's cleared." The sheriff blinked. "You sure about that, Garrison?" "I'm sure," Elias said. "And she walks free. No man owns her." A murmur swept through the crowd. A few scoffed. Others looked away, ashamed to have left the woman to her fate. Elias handed over the coins and stepped onto the platform. He loosened the rope from her wrists, careful not to startle her. When she looked up, her eyes were wide, uncertain, searching. "Why?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Elias tipped his hat slightly. "Don't have to." He led her away through the murmuring onlookers, ignoring their stares. When they reached his horse, he offered her his canteen. Her hands trembled as she drank. "They call me Clara," she said after a moment. "Clara Dean. Folks say I bring death to any man foolish enough to stand near me." Elias shrugged lightly. "Then I reckon I'll just keep living long enough to prove them wrong." She blinked, startled by the gentleness of the words, and for a heartbeat her mouth softened, as though she wanted to smile but had forgotten how. The road to Elias's ranch stretched 30 miles through rolling plains, dusty trails, and lonely stretches of quiet earth. Clara said little at first. Every bump in the trail made her grip the saddle horn harder, as though life had taught her to brace for a blow even when none was coming. But with every mile, color returned to her cheeks. Her breathing steadied. The wind toyed with her tangled hair. "You can rest at my ranch," Elias said finally. "Just until you find your footing." "I don't need charity," she murmured. "Wasn't offering charity," he said gently. "Just a roof till the storm passes." By the time they reached his ranch, dusk had bled into crimson across the horizon. Elias pushed open the cabin door, revealing a simple but tidy space. A stone hearth burned low. A small table held a pot of coffee and a single Bible. Clara sank into the chair near the fire, shawl draped over her knees, eyes shimmering with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. "Men don't usually help me," she said quietly. They think I bring bad luck. Elias set a cup of coffee beside her. And what do you think? She stared at the flames. My first husband died in the mines. The next got thrown from a horse and never rose again. After that, I stopped hoping anyone would come near me. Better for them, safer. Elias studied her, seeing not a curse but a woman scraped raw by loss. Sometimes folks see curses, he said, where there's only sorrow. Her gaze snapped toward him. And what do you see? I see a woman who's still standing. Her breath hitched, and a small, uncertain smile broke across her face. It was the first honest smile she'd worn in years. Rain began to fall that night, soft and steady, pattering against the roof. Clara stood by the window, watching drops slide down the glass. The warmth of the room, the rhythm of the rain, the simple kindness, it all wrapped around her like a long-forgotten mercy. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Weeks passed. Clara worked from dawn to dusk. She repaired fences with practiced hands. She cooked hearty meals that turned Elias's quiet cabin into something that felt like a home. She tended the livestock as though she'd spent her life ranching. But something else happened, something no one expected. The ranch began to thrive. The ground, long dry and stubborn, softened. The grass grew greener than it had in years. The horses grew stronger. The cattle fattened. Even the apple tree near the cabin burst into early bloom, its pale flowers glittering in the sunlight like something out of a waking dream. Neighbors noticed. You sure she ain't a witch? One man joked as he leaned on Elias's gate. Your land's risen from the dead since she got here. Elias just smiled. Maybe some folks bring curses. She brings life. Clara heard him say it. It warmed her in a way she couldn't name. One evening she found Elias repairing a corral post. His shirt clung to his back, sweat dripping down his brow. You shouldn't defend me, she said softly. People will turn on you. Elias wiped his hands on his trousers. Let em talk. I've lived half my life alone with ghosts. Folks jawing won't change that. Clara stepped closer, voice trembling. You saved me, but I don't know how to repay you. Just keep living, he said, eyes steady. That's thanks enough. A hush settled around them then. Not romance, not yet, but trust. Something steady and quiet and growing. By summer, Bitter Creek couldn't stop talking about Elias's ranch. The harvest was full. The cattle were sleek. Elias himself looked stronger, his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. Clara worked beside him every day, laughter slowly returning to her voice. Then the storm came. A monstrous thundercloud rolled in without warning, swallowing the sky. Lightning ripped across the plains as Elias tried to move his livestock into shelter. His prized stallion panicked, bolting from the corral. Elias chased it, slipping in the mud, and a heavy beam tumbled from the barn roof, crashing across his leg. Elias! Clara screamed. She ran through the rain, skirts soaked, hair whipping wildly. With strength born of terror, she lifted the beam just enough, just long enough, for him to crawl free. He fell against her, soaked and shaking. When the storm finally passed, Elias looked up at her, breathless. You saved me. Clara shook her head, tears mixing with rain. You saved me first. He managed a weak grin. Guess we're even now. That evening, after dry clothes and warmth returned to the cabin, Clara sat beside him by the fire. Flames crackled softly between them. All my life, she whispered, people called me cursed. But since coming here, everything is different. Elias took her hand gently. Maybe you weren't a curse, Clara. Maybe you were the miracle I'd been praying for. Her breath caught. Tears shimmered in her eyes. The world outside was still harsh, still unforgiving. But inside that small cabin, something rare and fragile had taken root. Hope.